Hello, and welcome to Ideas with Diana. Hello, and welcome to Ideas with Diana, the September 14th, 2020 edition. Well, on some of the topics I'd like to talk about is just give you an update of the COVID situation in the Midwest here. In the liberal city, basically, the Racine Kenosha dual city area, we still have limited openings. For example, at Parkside, guests are only allowed with pre-approval or pre-arranged visits. So it means you have to actually contact someone on campus to visit if you are not a student or a researcher. Tomorrow I'm going to return library books I checked out from the UW library and see whether I can actually go to a library or have to leave them with the concierge. This will be the first time the library will be open to actually do business in about 5 months and that. But they did have a good policy when the library did shut down that basically they asked everyone to hold the books until they could reopen again. September 15th is supposed to be the library's grand opening. So maybe with a friend of mine, we can go down there and see what the new library looks like. I'd be happy to do so. And also, I'd be happy to see, if we can even do podcasting, because it is important that we can meet in groups of more than one, or at least meet in groups of three. Now, news with the Kenosha Public Library, the Northside Library reopened the full service today on the 14th. A friend of mine went down there to see about the conference room using for podcasts. Right now, that is unavailable because they just said temporary unavailable. The computers are available, but they're separated by 6 feet apart. So there's less computers for use, but you can still use them, for internet surfing. But again, 6 feet apart. When my friend went down there, he just saw a few people. So I guess the word hasn't gotten out yet. We'll see about nighttime activities, whether that can resume, as well as NaNoWriMo. Just a thought, though. I mentioned I wouldn't say anything about Kenosha, but basically, I will change that because just an insight. 2 weeks ago, they had the riots in Kenosha where a group of people from out of state came in and acted stupid and decided to burn things, destroy things, and 600 arrests and also different photos taken where they're going through the photos to find out the identities of the people. So using face technology, so they won't be able to run. But just to let everyone know, 40 of the businesses in Kenosha are down for the count. 8, 9, 10, they're down for the count. Even though President Trump promised $5 million to rebuild. All that figure was based on partially assessed buildings that weren't at 100% of prime value. So the real value to rebuild all those buildings and meet current codes and insurance is actually $50 million. And they're trying to figure this out down there, what to do. For many of those businesses, are mom and pop, basically it's if you have to work on basically a low insurance sum, and since downtown Kenosha has now changed, it's no longer that was something you thought of in other cities where like in Chicago where they have the weekend shootings or weekend murders or something like that. Well, Kenosha has become part of Chicago officially with the protest, and quiet downtown is no more. So same as we've seen, even before the Kenosha protests months ago, when I went with friends out to a famous Racine restaurant to have a chocolate malted a hamburger, we walked around and I looked on the other side of Main Street. I saw these boarded buildings. I thought, well, what in the world? And they said, yeah, they had three groups of rioters that came down Main Street and did their violence things and stuff, and many of them claim that they honor Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and even Martin Luther King said, if someone steals a TV, breaks something, or steals something, they're not a protester, they're a criminal. And basically, well, apparently, I guess they forgot that history. They want to erase that history too. I guess so. Because they don't want to, and even Malcolm X said the same thing. So they want to erase that history too. So I guess they want to erase things that are convenient, that are convenient to them. And well, you wonder what type of society we're going to have if we erase all the history that's just convenient at the moment. What type of civilization can we maintain? Because many inventions were made basically by people that weren't always politically correct. A lot of inventions were made by people that basically were politically incorrect. Just to give you an example, many people think, when you for people who have health insurance cards, Social Security, other thing, that number on your card that comes out, it says, hospital runs through and you get your benefits or you get your prescription. Well, that originally was not invented at the time that Social Security came about. Part of the automated processing of that with computers actually came from borrowed technology that was obtained by an Operation Paperclip type thing, because it is actually developed using key sorting machines, and is developed for originally a viral purpose in Nazi Germany. But then after the war, it was transferred to modern computers to help with Medicaid processing starting in 1965, as well as Social Security processing starting in 1954 with the UNIVACs. The thing is, and what happens in other histories, many things that people think that some cultures can invent. Like there's some people who are racist who think that, well, everything comes from their racist group. Whether it's someone's racist white, someone who's racist black. Well, but just to give an example, like us, it's like if someone's racist white, they'll say, well, the idea of crop rotation came from our group. No, actually, that actually came from George Washington Carver, African American, who was a professional and a professor, who worked at a university in the South and discovered that crop rotation does keep the plants in farm going longer, and that was adopted by the U.S. government, and the word was passed around. But it took a while for him to get credit for it. But basically, begrudgingly, even a lot of racist farmers have to admit that their farms were saved thanks to George Washington Carver. And this gets back to the idea about cancel culture. Basically, one group wants to cancel things by putting this X, whatever, this red X, black X, whatever you call it. Okay, fine. They want to cancel things because basically they were made by politically incorrect people. Well, there are many inventions that are made by politically incorrect people. In ancient Greek cultures, many aspects of sanitation, even in the Roman cultures of sanitation, were made and also discovered by the use of slave labor. So what does that mean? We get rid of sanitation, we get rid of flush toilets, we get rid of water because that was, no. What happens though is, they still like the idea that the 70s had. In the 70s, there's an episode, I used to watch Super Friends with other kids my age, and we remember watching an episode where there's an inventor who made a thing that he wanted to use for evil, and well, what happened, what the Super Friends did was basically, I'll just give a 5-second pause. Now, what would you think the Super Friends would do once they got in charge of this invention? What would they destroy it or do something else? Well, how many of you said that they did something else with it? That was the answer they chose. Because what happens, they realize that any invention or any part of history has positive and negative uses. So what the episode of Super Friends is, they put the invention on hold until basically that another use could be found for it that could be used peacefully. And that's the thing about history, though. Yes, history has good and bad moments. However, you just can't cancel things, erase things, and say, well, okay, we want to erase all these books because all these books are bad books because they mentioned this and this. And or and folks, the Nazis tried that too. They called that degenerate art and degenerate books. They had book burning and they had art burning. They didn't use the spray paint with the X. They actually set up fires, and actually they confiscated books and persecuted people for that. And degenerate art, degenerate books didn't work then, because even the world then, which had less of an education, saw that basically that's not freedom either, because basically that's basically one person making a complete judgment for all of history forward on, which isn't right. So basically, um, things will come, change comes, but basically it doesn't come by this cancel movement, cancel this. It comes by basically people understanding what the history is, what really did happen, and why did it happen, what the true history on both sides, not just one-sided. Like when I went to grade school, we were taught that basically in the Civil War, or as in the South, it said war between the states, that slavery only existed, that there were only white slave owners. However, later on, when my parents saw that my education was being slanted by too liberal of a perspective, I actually learned, and even Glenn Beck pointed out many times in his broadcast, that during the Civil War, war between the states, there were black slave owners as well, that fought as well. So the point is, slavery existed in many forms, and in the North, it's called wage slavery, because if someone lost their job in the North during that time, prior to the Civil War, even years afterwards, their family was literally dead. There was no social support system, no help, unless the church wasn't willing to help or something else like that, though. So that's why when Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation and the 14th Amendment, it was supposed to eliminate both forms of slavery in the North and in the South. But we still have wage slavery today, when you have people who are working at jobs where basically they have to get state Medicare to pay for the health care, even though they're working full time. In up to the 70s, and even up to before NAFTA, when you worked full time, you had full compensation, you had health insurance, you had educational reimbursement, you had profit sharing, you had employment stock ownership options, all that. Also, 3 weeks paid vacation, going to 6 weeks paid vacation in the second year. Um, you also had time off for if your children were sick. In addition, the compensation was that you could actually own your own home and own two cars. And even with minimum wage, you still had enough to rent a good apartment, own a car, and also have money to go to college and not have to rely on state services. That's not true today. We've regressed quite a bit. But but the thing is, do I believe in supporting the far left proposal of doing communism? No. I've seen communism. Other friends of mine have seen communism. Folks, the workers' paradise doesn't work, because basically um, the problem with the workers' paradise is basically everyone becomes poor, all services become shoddy, and basically if you're not happy, you want to move someplace else. No, you're part of that workers' paradise. You're planted there as long as you are living like that. So you have no freedom to move or anything else. That's why when the Berlin Wall was up, many people, even in East Germany, which was supposed to be the jewel of the workers' paradise under the old communism Cold War thing, many people died trying to get over the Berlin Wall and get out of East Germany, because they realized that the workers' paradise is another form of hell. It's another circle of hell. So it is conservatism and capitalism is better. It's not perfect, but it is better. The thing is, though, even though we may have our opinions and our beliefs and disagreements, we shouldn't come to the point where basically where people are going to go fight it with one another, or do other stuff. I mean, like even in this Bloomberg article, I survived the election. Um, never in my lifetime have I lived where that has been the case. I mean, I grew up in I was born in the early 60s, and I remember in 67 when Milwaukee was on the National Guard, and we had to come back and we had to have a National Guardsman escort us back to our apartment in Wauwatosa. But compared to what I saw the last 2 weeks in Kenosha, that incident in 67 is not as frightful as what I saw in Kenosha 2 weeks ago. And part of the reason is because basically what happened in Kenosha there was at one point, there's a discussion whether to send the National Guard, whether or not to send National Guard. That's that's something, that, I mean, it should never gone that far because um, based on what caused the event, do I feel that that what happened with that what originally caused the event was shocking? Yes. Do I agree that basically we should go to a first democracy where justice is done by a mob? No. We are a second democracy and we are a republic. So basically, in a republic, the individual rights are upheld, and the democracy only the mob rights are upheld. So I would never support a mob. That's why I prefer basically to see what the inquest brings out and what a federal investigation finds, and then evaluate afterwards. But when the mob rule came and said, "Well, let's do this burning of Kenosha businesses," and even in Racine, it got crazy because basically where I live, the Firestone store, Rainbow Shopping Center, Rainbow Store, and basically some other stores in the mall that's next to me, they were hit. Um, and even a week after the Kenosha riots, one McDonald's that is open where you can sit outside on the tables, someone went in there and tried to burn that McDonald's down, and still isn't open. And all these businesses that were hit and we seen in that McDonald's, guess what? All those businesses support Black Lives Matter. They bend over backwards to train black managers. They bend over backwards to hire people. They give people second and even third chances. And also this is a very diversified area where people do work together. So this is very very weird to us to see this because basically we do work together. We are diversified, and with these people from all state, since basically, I can understand it, others can't. We wonder if it is terrorism because basically terrorists would attack basically to cause fear and terror. Someone who lives in the area something else wouldn't be doing this. Even though they may be passionate, they're not to the point where basically you got to wear a sticker that says "I survived." You know, so basically, with this election, sometimes people ask me what my thoughts are, and some people wonder what the polls are like you'll see different polls as who's leading Biden, Trump. Well, now this is we've seen mostly as a Democratic area. However, when you see people basically in the last 2 weeks, because of what's happened, you'll see a lot of people wearing T-shirts that says Trump 2020 or hats Trump 2020, and even myself, because part of the reason is even though Biden came out and said, a few days ago he will not support violence, he will not support looting. Well, sorry, it's a little bit too late. He should have said that. He should have said that in June before the Minneapolis police station was burned, and other places were burned. And that's what the problem is what I think why that's part of the reason why I'm voting for Trump, because basically is that I don't think Biden has the backbone, or neither does his vice presidential candidate have the backbone to say no to certain groups that they're ethnically tied to. That basically, I think there's too high of an ethnocentrism tie, and so I don't think they have the backbone to do it. Trump has the backbone, and I do understand that basically that maybe some concerns. However, what I'm hoping for is that due to the changes in the federal government in 1947, that some of those concerns can be mitigated, um, and that basically by 2024, the Democrats can find a qualified person to run for president, not based on ethnocentricity and not based on basically old school ties like that, though, and someone who is max from age 60. I think it's time we set our age requirement for president. Now, if we were to set an age requirement for president, I would say the age requirement for president to be elected in the first term should be 64. 64 for the first his or her first term in office should be 64, because the problem that we're getting into now is, yes, both of them have passed a competency test, which is great, but many historians remember the thing about Roosevelt. Roosevelt was quite old when he was elected in his fourth term, and he literally became just like a waving puppet, brought out when needed to speak, and it's and that and there are analogies made today about the same thing about this campaign. Certain people are brought out to speak at certain times and not, and but the thing is, part of the reason why I'm voting for Trump is because I know he has a backbone, and when he says he's going to do something, like the thing about the monuments, when they're tearing down the monuments, sign an executive order right then and there. Prison term, guess what? No more monuments are being pulled down or defaced. Good job. And that's what we need to do. Will Biden do that? I don't think so. I think there'll be committees, polls, whatever way the flames play. So, no, I do care for social programs, and I am a social conservative. And some people even call me basically a blue dog Democrat, but the problem is leadership. And also the second problem is I don't believe in solving social problems through any form of communism, whether it's called Marxism, whether it's called Green New Deal, whether communism. No, if you still because here's the point to remember: many people who are using the term in Black Lives Movement and also in other movements say, "Well, we're Marxists, we're still American." Well, okay, that you say that, basically, but then your group does all this. Then some people, do all this violence, and I haven't heard anyone from Black Lives Movement said that's not our people. I didn't reading the Tribune. I haven't seen any news items about that. The second point is, some other people say, well, the mayors of Milwaukee were socialists. No, they were American socialists. There's a difference between socialist and American socialist. American socialist still supports the Constitution, still supports the Bill of Rights, where you have a right to make your own, invent things. You have a right to own them, and you have a right to make a profit. You have a right to be safe with your possessions. You have the four freedoms. Socialism, you do not have a Bill of Rights. You do not have the four freedoms. You do not have freedom of press, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, and freedom of speech. In addition, you do not have the right to avoid double jeopardy. You do not have the right to have your effects secure in your own place. You do not have the right to see how to make money from your invention or your creativity, because it's the state expects you to give all your creativity, and they'll treat you as they please. So basically, to those who on the far right say, well, sorry, if you drop the communism, I'll reevaluate, but I will not support you if you keep the communism or the AKA Marxism, because that's another name for communism, just as socialism is the human face of communism. That was even defined by Lenin in Das Kapital. American socialism of the Milwaukee mayors, that was supporting American ideas, but that was based on adding social programs and also adding ways to pay for those programs using borrowing from capitalism, but it wasn't complete European socialism at that time about basically a mob rule or a workers' paradise, because even the Milwaukee mayors were intelligent enough to realize that that would not work, and it hasn't worked. That's why communism fell. Um, the other thing I just want to close with is one hobby of mine is I like to like code. I like to see what languages exist in computers, and because my degree is in computer science, master's in business administration, advanced degree doctoral in management and organizational behavior. So what I like to do is I like to see, well, what tools exist to sort of work with older programs, because I still think older programs have a value. And what I did this week is I tried to look at different Fortran compilers. I was looking at them and trying some. I tried one compiler. I was trying an old program my dad wrote, and I was running it through. And what happened, I was doing an open statement, and I got this segmentation fault, or basically end of file in Fort.4 or something like that. And trying to figure this out, I went online, looked at internet. And I found all these references to segmentation fault using new Fortran, and basically I saw one thing that looked promising, but one person said, "Well, we want to see your code before we say anything." And I thought that was funny. Why do you need to see the whole code to say anything? Why can't you just see part of the statement? And so that's when basically I decided to do my own test to find out why this segmentation fault was calling when I was doing an open statement of Fortran. Well, what happened was finally landed debugger. It came out to live GCC that blah, 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 blah is missing. So what happens, I looked at it and said, and I looked at it and said, okay, I have new Fortran installed properly. And I said, well, then what happened, I looked at it, tried another program. I went to Simply Fortran, downloaded a demo. That compiled properly, and I found out. Then what happened was basically I searched again because I still wanted to see what was wrong with this new Fortran, because I just downloaded 2 weeks ago, as a full package that's up to date. And then what happened, I saw a note. There's a bug. There's one module that wasn't included, so I have to get Fortran 1.7. So downloaded this, and the program worked. But what this gets into a point of, though, is again, this gets into a point of leadership, because basically when you release a package, there should be better quality control to check to make sure that all the libraries are present. Simple test programs that someone, when they install code blocks or they install something else, simple test programs that someone can run to say, okay, to make sure that the open statement works, that returns, like when you do an open statement and create a file, it turns an IL status 0, or basically read a file that you can read data until returns. Simple test programs, more than just hello world. Because what I don't like about the hello world program is, that's used in every language as a way to test it, to verify it works. Because a hello world says, okay, hello world, fine. But most programs are not where they shoot things at you. They're interactive. You get something, you type something in, it shows something. So my version is this. My version is, hi, what is your name? Then you type in what your name is, and then it prints out or goes in a box, nice to meet you, and whatever name you typed. And to me, see, that tests simple input and output, whether you're using a terminal, whether you're using a graphic user interface, whether you're using Android, iOS. Again, but see, the thing is, that's where leadership comes in. And I just hope basically with this election season, I just hope basically we won't have to wear these I survive pins with this upcoming election, because the American election system is never supposed to be basically of a have and a have not, and basically the election is a precursor to something else. It's always supposed to be, we discuss, sometimes we argue, but we always come together. I mean, and just in closing, the best thing, just to give an example of it, in 2008, Barack Obama had a campaign against late Senator John McCain. And that campaign was very many people thought about the issues, that and also the people, because I mean, at that time, people were thinking about such and such and such and such, and it became basically very touchy even for Republicans like me and my friends, and basically because some of us, some basically said, well, they felt that they're going to vote against McCain because when they appointed Sarah Palin, they thought that McCain threw in the towel. I didn't think so, but basically other people did. But other people thought, well, I'm going to vote for McCain because I want to make sure that Obama knows that he doesn't have a clear consensus. However, the point is, spirits were very, very high and very, 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 very intense. Well, the best thing I think that happened in that election was, on that night, Barack Obama spoke and thanking John McCain for a good campaign, and but the most important thing that came, it wasn't Obama's speech that was most important to me, it was what John McCain said, because John McCain spoke and said something like this: "This has been a hard campaign. This has been very decisive as to what people are thinking and what." But he said, "Please, one thing: we are all Americans. Let's come together. Let's work together. This is not a campaign of that the Democratic Party won and the Republicans lost, or that Barack Obama won and I lost. It's about it that we as Americans have made a choice." And I think that speech by John McCain did more to keep the nation healed and together that night, because I think if he hadn't made that speech, I think there might have been there might not have been the healing, and that's what I think what's needed this election season, and that usually I like to keep some of my thoughts very private, but I thought it's important to say this. Well, if you want to reach me, I'm on Twitter at Diana1A, and also on Twitter with Ideas with Diana. We're still working to see what we can do about getting the podcast with Lon, Nikita, and Matt. Right now, we don't have places where the four of us can meet all together, but we're still working on that. And we're still working on another podcast as well with the radio station at Parkside. That's still up in the air because WIPZ is temporarily suspended from broadcasting, and a decision's going to be made in late spring. So we may be able to get back, but we're also looking for other radio stations that may be interested. So, I mean, if folks know of us on how to contact iHeart, we'd be interested in working with iHeart Radio. So, if someone from iHeart Radio is listening, just send me a message at Diana1A with your phone number, and I'll give you a call back, and then we can go take it from there. Well, let me know what you think, and the next podcast will probably be in about 2 weeks or so. Well, for everyone, have a good week, and also just keep calm during this election season.